Yeah.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Welcome to our class today. I cannot see you. I haven't been seeing you guys for the longest while, but nevertheless, I teach this class like I'm teaching on a radio. I don't see anybody. Tonight, what we are going to do is we are going to review chapter 2 and just the highlights. I call it the takeaway from chapter 2. And I have 4 points to talk about. The first one will be takeaway from Daniel, what Daniel did, what happened with Daniel in chapter 2. The takeaway from Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar, what Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar. The takeaway from the dream or the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, and Nebuchadnezzar's response. So let's start with the takeaway from Daniel. Remember, Daniel was about 15, 16 years old at that time. And the first thing we know about Daniel is he had total confidence in his God at the age of 15 or 16 years old. Daniel had total confidence in his God in verse 16, chapter 2. He told the king that he will show him the interpretation. Simple, straightforward. He said, give me some time and I will show you the interpretation. No doubts about what the answer is going to be. I will show you. He was confident that God is going to show him the interpretation of the dream. So Daniel went home. He talked to his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they had a prayer meeting. And Daniel got the answer to his prayer in a night vision. The first thing Daniel did was he praised and thanked God. In verse 19, it says, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel blessed the name of God forever and ever. And in verse 23, I thank thee and praise thee. So after Daniel received the answer to his prayer, he praised and thanked God. This is what happened in Daniel chapter 2. The second thing Daniel did, he acknowledged the power of God. In verse 21, he said, he changeth the season, the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. So he was acknowledging the power of God in his praise. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. And that's verse 21. In verse 22, he said that it is God who revealed the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in darkness, and the light dwelleth in him. What am I talking about? Daniel had confidence in his God. Daniel got the answer to his prayers. And what he did after he got the answer to his prayers was he praised God. He acknowledged the power of God, and he acknowledged that God is the source of his gift. Remember in Daniel chapter 1, we saw that Daniel was 10 times smarter than the magicians and the Chaldeans and the sorcerers and things like that in Daniel chapter 1. He did not rely on his own knowledge, but he depended on God. He acknowledged God was the source of his gift. He said in verse 23, O thou God of my fathers, who had given me wisdom and might. So Daniel acknowledged whatever he had came from God and had made known unto me now what we desire of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. So he did not rely on his smartness, or he did not say, wait, guys, sorry, I'm smarter than you all. That's why I figured it out. But he acknowledged that God was the source of everything. So this is three things we got to take away from Daniel. Now let's see, take away from Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. The first thing Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar was there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. This is the first introduction Nebuchadnezzar ever had to the God of heaven. And this is Daniel testifying before Nebuchadnezzar about the God in heaven. He said, there is a God in heaven. Now, Nebuchadnezzar used to worship idols and Aku and those other gods, Baal and the other gods. And he is now being introduced to the one true God in heaven. He said, there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the last days. So the whole idea at this point is that the God in heaven is going to make known to Nebuchadnezzar what shall happen at the end of time. What shall happen at the end of time? It is coming from God to Nebuchadnezzar. For the God of heaven had given thee a kingdom and power and strength and glory. So what Daniel is saying, he is testifying a very strong testimony. He is witnessing a very strong witness. Mr. Nebuchadnezzar, O King Nebuchadnezzar, the God in heaven is the one who is going to reveal to you what will happen in the last days. O King Nebuchadnezzar, the God of heaven is the one that gave you your kingdom, your power, your strength, and your glory. It had nothing to do with what you did. It was the God of heaven. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hands, and hath made thee ruler over them all. So all the authority that you have, all the power you have, all the glory you have, it was given to you by the God of heaven. It is he who made you ruler over them. The great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. Now, this knowledge that has been imparted in Daniel chapter 2 to King Nebuchadnezzar, who was a heathen king, is the type of knowledge that you will find the prophet Isaiah would have, or the prophet Ezekiel, or the prophet Joel, or the prophet Daniel. This is how God held Nebuchadnezzar in high esteem, and he is revealing unto him things that will happen in the future. Take away from the dream or the image. This is the third one. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. The image head was of fine gold, the breast and arms of silver, the belly and the thighs of brass, and the legs of iron. His feet are part of iron and part of clay. So this was the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. And what I would like you to do is to learn this. I want you to study this because this is the foundation for the rest of the book of Daniel. Okay, so it's four parts to this image: a head of gold, a breast of silver, a belly of brass, and a leg of iron, and iron and clay. Four kingdoms. Thou art the head of gold. That is verse 38. Now, we are talking about kingdoms here. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another kingdom, another third kingdom of brass. So in this verse, we are talking about the image that he saw of gold, brass, silver, brass, and iron. And then he is explaining what this is about. The head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar. But really, the head of gold is Babylon. But what Daniel did here is he put King Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon itself as one and all. Nebuchadnezzar was Babylon, and Babylon was Nebuchadnezzar. The other kingdoms were kingdoms. They did not. Daniel did not talk about the leaders. He talked about the kingdoms. But when he was talking about Babylon, he said, "Thou art the head of gold." Nebuchadnezzar, you are Babylon. You are that head of gold. Let's go on. And the fourth kingdom, the first thing you would see is how much uh, time Daniel spent on the fourth kingdom, how much space. Like the second kingdom, the third kingdom, they get one line. Uh, the fourth kingdom got a whole paragraph. The fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. And thou sawest still the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, and the kingdom shall be divided. As the toes of the feet are part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall partly be strong and partly broken. Thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, thou shalt they shall mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as uh, iron is not mixed with clay. So he explained a lot about the fourth kingdom, which is very important, which is the fourth part of the image. Now, Babylon in part C, verse 38, Babylon, that kingdom lasted between 66 and 67 years. The second kingdom lasted 208 years. The third kingdom lasted 185 years. And the fourth kingdom lasted 959 years. This is a total of 1418 years. So Nebuchadnezzar saw in his vision the future 1400 years in the future. This is what Nebuchadnezzar saw so far. And remember, this is the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. It had four kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, the chest of silver, brass, and iron. So this is what he saw in Daniel chapter 2. Take away from the dreams. Thou sawest till a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon the feet that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces. So now we are introduced to a stone. We saw the image, we saw the description of the image, we saw the meaning of the image. Now we are introduced to a stone that was cut out without hands. It was coming down the road, like we would say, it was coming down, Trini would say, it is coming down the road pell-mell. And it hit the image on the foot, which is the weakest part. And it broke the pieces, the image together in pieces. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out with off the mountain without hands, and that it break into pieces the iron, the brass, the silver, the clay, and the silver, and the gold. Then was the iron and clay and brass and silver and gold and broken to pieces together and became as the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, and no place was found for them. So Nebuchadnezzar saw that the little stone smite the image on the feet, everything crumbled, it turned to dust, and it disappeared. So now the only thing standing is the stone. Let's see what happens. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So the stone started to grow, and it became a big mountain and filled the earth. And uh, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven, and then again he refers to the God of heaven, in the days of these kings, which is 10 kings, the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So then Nebuchadnezzar saw up to the Roman Empire, and that was 1400 years, and then he went further than that. He saw the revived Roman Empire, where in the days of these kings, God will set up his kingdom. So then he's going into the millennial kingdom. Like I said before, Nebuchadnezzar saw way into the future, way at the end of the book of Revelation, into the 1,000 years reign of Christ and the establishment of his kingdom. It said in the days of these kings. Now look at Revelation chapter 17, verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have not received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. This is as far as Nebuchadnezzar saw. He saw the establishment of 10 kings. In the book of Revelation, those 10 kings were converted to 10 horns. The 10 horns represented 10 kings. After that, will God establish his kingdom. In those days, God will establish his kingdom. So God chose Nebuchadnezzar to show him the future of the world. Let's go on. Nebuchadnezzar's response. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation of sweet odor unto him. But look what he said. Of a truth it is that your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of secret, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. So I told you last day, I believe that Nebuchadnezzar bowed before Daniel as a representative of the God of heaven because of what he said. He did not worship Daniel and say, oh, thou Daniel, thou art a great man and you revealed this amazing secret. He didn't say that. He said, your God is the God of God and the Lord of kings because he revealed the secret. He acknowledged that Daniel's God is the one that revealed the secret. Now, that is as far as we learn from Daniel chapter 2. So let's go into Daniel chapter 3. And Pastor Michael, I think you would like this slide. We are leaving chapter 2 and going to chapter 3. Let's go on. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, and this is our lesson for today. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, and set it up in the plains of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. Now, I will be skipping a couple of verses because it is just repetitious. And this lesson, I know every Sunday school child know this lesson, and almost every adult have seen this lesson before. So we will not spend too much time with it, but we'll have to go through it. So Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold in Daniel chapter 2. Now, I believe that Daniel chapter 2 with the image was the idea is what gave Nebuchadnezzar the idea to set up this image. Now, he was only the head of gold. In this image, he made a complete image of gold. It was three score cubics, that is 60 cubics. Cubic is about 18 inches or 1.5 feet. So 3 scores multiplied by 1.5 will give you 90 feet tall. 6 cubics will be 9 feet wide. And the entire image will be of gold. We do not know who this image is of. We can assume, and I would assume it is of Nebuchadnezzar. We do not know. We wasn't told. This is the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. The second image is what have 4 parts. The first image is 1 head of gold. That's the difference between the 2 images. Now he set the image up in the plain of Dura. That is this light circle red, and this is the Babylonian kingdom. All of this was controlled by Nebuchadnezzar from Carchemish, Haran, Nineveh, Assyria, but he set up the image in the plain of Dura. Then Nebuchadnezzar sent and gathered together all the rulers of the province. There's a list of rulers in the province in Daniel chapter 2, verse 3, where he said the governors, the judges, the priests, the kings, everybody who was a ruler. This was not for the common person. It was for all rulers who represents the common people. So he gathered all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then an herald or a crier or an announcer cry aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nation, language, that at what time you hear the sound of all kinds of music," and there's a big list of music there in Daniel chapter 3, verse 5. I just left it out. "He should fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up." So this is the instruction. You will hear music playing, and in churches today we use music as a part of worship. Nebuchadnezzar used music as part of his dedication service and his worship also. So he said, when you hear the sound of the music, you fall down, face down, and you worship the image. "Whosoever falleth not down and worship shall at the same time be cast into the midst of a fiery furnace." Now, you will notice from Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar just liked to threaten people. What did he say to the magicians when they couldn't tell him his dream? He said, "I will chop you up in pieces and I will make your house a dunghill." So you have a choice here. You want to live? You give me my dream. You don't want to live, or you can't give me my dream, I'm going to chop you up. Over he said, if you worship me, if you worship the image, fine. If you don't worship the image, I will cast you into the fiery furnace. So you got a choice. And then as time went by, verse 10, "Thou, O king, has made a decree that every man," this is when the Chaldeans came to the king, and he said that you made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of music, shall fall down and worship the image. King, did you say that? Yes, you did. "And whosoever falleth not down and worship, that he should be cast into the midst of the fiery furnace." So these guys came to the king and said, "You made this announcement that everybody must fall down when they hear the music and worship the image. Did you not say that?" "Yes, I did." "Okay, there are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon." So these people was watching. They supposed to be falling down and worshiping the image. Somehow they were peeking, and they saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, these Jews, and remember, these are leaders. Now, this particular verse will give us an indication when did this event take place in Daniel chapter 3. We do not have a date stamp on this, so but we can assume this happened after chapter 2, because in chapter 2 he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of Babylon. So in chapter 3, the Chaldeans were saying, those Jews that you put over the affairs of Babylon. So obviously this happened after chapter 2. And he said, now chapter 2 happened in 603. So this would be around the end of 603 or 604. And he said, these men have no regard for thee. They do not serve your God. They do not worship your image, which you have set up. So Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, Shadrach, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you do not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image that I set up? If ye be ready, at the time when you hear the sound of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well, that's cool. But if you do not worship, he shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So here he gave them a choice. They bought Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Guess what? Where is Daniel? Daniel probably was out on business because he was also part of the administration. But in chapter 2, he was sitting at the king's gate. Maybe he was watching the palace at that particular day. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was there. Now they had responsibility, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they were representing the Jewish people. Remember, everybody attending this dedication were leaders. They were rulers in the province of Babylon. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego they were representing the Jewish people before King Nebuchadnezzar. So then if they were going to get killed, then maybe all the Jewish people might have gotten killed. So he gave them a choice now. He said, you're going to hear the music one more time. And if you worship the image, then that's cool. I appreciate that. But if you do not, I will throw you in the fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar," they left out the word king. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of thy hands, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy God nor worship the golden image which you set up." It's simple, straightforward. King, we believe that God is going to deliver us out of the fiery furnace. If he don't, then so be it. Now, this is the reason why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down to the image. They knew the Torah. In the Torah it says, "I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me." This is why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to worship the image. "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Do not make any image. Do not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not bow thyself to them, nor serve them. For I am the Lord thy God, am a jealous God." That's Exodus chapter 20, verse 2 through 5. This is the reason why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to worship the image. Now in chapter 2, Daniel introduced Nebuchadnezzar to the God of heaven. In chapter 2, God revealed himself through revealing the dream and the interpretation of the dream. Now, this is the reason why those young men refused to bow down to the image. Then these men were bound. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound. Their hosen, their hats, and their other garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So what was happening here was the fiery furnace was overheating. Within an hour, they tried to hot the fiery furnace 7 times more hotter than before. So that would cause it to overheat. It wasn't a slow process. They had to do it within an hour. And they took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in all the clothes that they were wearing, bound them up hand and foot, and I could see 2 big, strong, mighty soldiers, one holding the shoulder and one holding the 2 feet, stringing them together like a hammer and throwing them into the fiery furnace. Next verse, 23. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Obviously, if you throw them by the hand and foot into the fiery furnace, they will fall down. Okay? So three men bound in the fiery furnace fell down in the midst of the fiery furnace. The guys who throw them in the fiery furnace died. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astounded and rose up in haste and spake and said to his counselors, did not we cast three men bound into the midst of the fiery furnace? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. And he answered and said, lo, I see four men loose. Those men were bound when they were cast into the fiery furnace. Now Nebuchadnezzar is saying, hey, I'm seeing four men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And uh the fourth is like unto the Son of God. Now, this is plain, this is simple, this is clear. You throw three men bound in the fiery furnace, now you are seeing them loose, walking around, and they have company. And the fourth is like unto the Son of God. Now, you hear preachers preaching over and over that Jesus was in the midst of the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar don't know who Jesus was. Nebuchadnezzar was just introduced to the God of heaven. What he was saying is, the fourth is like unto a son of God, or the fourth is majestic, the fourth is upright and powerful, the fourth looks like a leader, and he described him as a son of God. That is what was taking place. Now, this is what the fiery furnace should look like, and the fourth is like unto the Son of God. Now, something was happening in Jerusalem the same time that these three boys was cast into the fiery furnace. Let me revisit that. Do you remember after Jeremiah wrote the scroll and a copy of the scroll came to the king, Jehoiakim? Then the king sat in his winter house in the 9th month, and there was a fire on the heat burning before him. So they brought the scroll that Jeremiah wrote, which is like Torah scroll of the prophet, and brought it to the king. And the king was in his winter house. There was a fire in front of him to keep him warm. And it came to pass that when Jehudi had read 3 or 4 leaves, how many men were in the fire? 3 or 4 men was in the fire. He cut it with a penknife and had cast it into the fire that was on the heat, until the whole roll was consumed in the fire that was on the heat. So while Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was in the fiery furnace in Babylon, the Torah scroll was being burnt in Jerusalem about the same time. And they stressed 3 or 4 leaves. The whole scroll was burnt up, but they stressed 3 or 4 leaves was being burnt in the fire beginning. This is a picture of Jehoiakim casting the leaves into the fire in Jerusalem at that time. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mount of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High, come forth. And they came hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the prince, governors, now this were the list of people who was in attendance to worship this idol or image that Nebuchadnezzar set up. The princes, the governors, the captains, the king's counselors being gathered together saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats charred, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. So all these witnesses who came to witness the dedication of the image, the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, they saw or experienced the power of God in the fiery furnace. And Nebuchadnezzar spake. What's the response of Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and had changed the king's words and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. So this is a second display of the power of God to Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, I told you at the beginning that Nebuchadnezzar was a heathen king. A lot of people say Nebuchadnezzar was a wicked king. But Nebuchadnezzar was introduced to God in chapter 2, and God revealed his power in chapter 2. Daniel witnessed to Nebuchadnezzar that everything he has and everything that he is because of the God of heaven. So God was working on Nebuchadnezzar. And remember, the Bible says, no one comes to God except the Spirit draws him. So God was working on Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar experienced the power of God in chapter 2. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is witnessing for the second time the power of God and his might. Now, the fire, the image, all these things have to do with Nebuchadnezzar's God. And God is displaying to Nebuchadnezzar that he is greater than his images, that his image, that is greater than his God, and he is greater than whatever Nebuchadnezzar could do. And he delivered the three men out of the fiery furnace. Therefore, I made a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces. Again, he's threatening people, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. I think he still didn't get it. Nebuchadnezzar still didn't get it, because look at what he's saying here. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language will speak anything amiss. He is trying to help God, or he's trying to protect God. That is not what God wants. So he's still not getting the idea that God is all powerful. It's like, hey, if you say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I will cut you up. I will make your house a dunghill. You can't put, he didn't realize that he still can't protect God. So he is missing the point. But God is still working on him. And he acknowledges that there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. So he is getting there. And finally, in verse 30, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So this brings us to the end of Daniel chapter 3. And like I said, this was a story that everybody knows. So, but we have to go through it. Next day, we will be dealing with Daniel chapter 4. And that will be the last time we will see Nebuchadnezzar. And we will see the amazing transformation that took place in his life. And then from chapter 4, we will be going straight on to chapter 7. And I will explain to you how we get there. And I promise you that it will become even more interesting. And I am excited about Daniel chapter 7, most excited about Daniel chapter 9, and the other chapters around there. So I hope that you are reading the book of Daniel. I hope you are revising the things that we went through before, and what we did in Daniel chapter 1, Daniel chapter 2, and now Daniel chapter 3. read up Daniel chapter 4, and we would get into Daniel chapter 4 next week, and we will find how that Nebuchadnezzar and his kingship. So at this time, Pastor Michael, I turn back to you. It's a little early, and I leave the rest to you.